Just a week after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced a halt to the controversial judicial overhaul bill, meetings now being held today to negotiate between the government and the opposition. The talks come after widespread protests took place across Israel after Netanyahu fired his defense minister Yoav Gallant when he had warned about the security implications of the coalition's proposals. President Isaac Herzog has time and again asked the sides to approach the talks in good faith. However, reports say the negotiations are widely expected to fail. Protest leaders and some opposition figures believe that the government still intends to pass the full judicial package and is only holding talks to quell opposition to the plan. Now, amid the talks, Transportation Minister, immediately after the Passover break, said that the government would continue to move forward with the judicial reforms and even claimed that Netanyahu paused legislation to allow for negotiation. But if there will be none, government will bring it back for reconfirmation. She also said that a Likud delegation has already been appointed to negotiate with the other side, and the team will see if there is a willingness for reasonable agreements that will meet the voters' expectations. Israel is in the grip of the most serious domestic crises in its history, with uproar over the government's plans to change the way the judicial system works, including appointment of judges and keeping key decisions by the government outside the scope of the judiciary. Now, for more on this, we're joined by our correspondent Jody Cohn live from Kfar Saba. Thank you so much for joining us, Jody. What can you tell us on the latest on the protests and also about the petition to the court saying that the Prime Minister should not even be involved in these judicial reform debates because that's a conflict of interest?
Hi, Hamza. Yes, the protests have continued over the weekend. On Saturday, we saw more anti-reform protests for the 13th week in a row. And on Sunday, activists invaded the offices of the conservative think tank Kohelet. We've also seen action among coalition supporters. So on Thursday, we saw pro-judicial reform protests with thousands taking to the streets. So there's clearly strong feelings on both sides. Meanwhile, as you said, there was this petition to the court against Prime Minister Netanyahu's involvement in the judicial reform debate. And they say that's because of a conflict of interest because of his ongoing trial. Now, Netanyahu said that he must be involved because he called it a national crisis. And his lawyers said that the original conflict of interest agreement stops the Prime Minister from being involved in matters regarding the selection of the judges themselves, but not the actual composition of the Judicial Selection Committee. And it was suggested that the judges appointed after the judicial legislation passes would not be involved in the Prime Minister's trial. But the opposition is against this whole issue of reforming judicial selection at all. Right. So the talks on that front and on others are continuing.
Right, absolutely. In fact, I was just going to come to this. How are the negotiations going between the coalition and the opposition on trying to find a compromise here? Are they dead on arrival, as some negotiators reportedly believe they are?
So President Herzog's office has said that the talks on trying to find a judicial reform compromise are continuing on Monday. But we know that protest leaders and some of the opposition party heads, they believe the government still plans to pass the full judicial package and are only holding talks to limit the opposition and weaken the opposition, and that the coalition still wants to change the makeup of the Judicial Selection Committee. Now, I'm outside the courthouse in Kfar Saba, and changing that legislation would mean changing the way judges are appointed in courthouses like this as well, across the country, as well as the Supreme Court. Right. Now, the coalition says that there's no checks right now on judicial power, and they need at least one check on judicial power. Trust is low. The opposition are wary of broken promises. Many in the coalition also see the protests as an attempt to get rid of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Right. We know that the legislation is likely to continue at the end of April, and some negotiators believe, as you said, that the talks are dead on arrival. But meanwhile, the parties are still negotiating, so it's too early to tell the outcome right now.
All right. Well, Jody, thank you so much for bringing us the latest on this. We will, of course, continue to track the developments in this case.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.